already in there.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's go ahead, bring to order the Templeton Community Services District Board of Directors meeting. Today is Tuesday, January 21st, it's 7 p.m. Can we please have a roll call?
Director Spardonish,
Here.
Logan is absent, Mortensen,
Here.
Peterson,
Here.
and Tyrone. Here.
Great, can we please stand for a pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please have a seat. Order of business. Do any of the board members would like to request a change in the order of business? No? Okay, we'll move on to the next item. We have sheriff's report. I guess Commander Manueli has retired and we have a new commander.
Yes.
Okay, so welcome.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Sandra Arauza. I've been with the Sheriff's Office for 13 years, been living in the county for 15 years, worked numerous assignments here in patrol, detectives, administration, and been fortunate enough to promote and now be in charge of North Station. And happy to be here, so thank you.
Thank you. Coming.
And I have numbers for you guys for December. We had 132 reports that's for the current year, and that's down 23% for 163 reports last year. For the total year, we had 1,466 calls for service, where last year we had 1,301. And now for December's numbers, we had 5 calls for service for assault and battery. 4 reports were taken. There were 3 were of domestic battery, and another one was a family dispute that resulted in a battery. We had 26 calls for service for disturbances. Only 1 report was taken. Some of those included, but not limited to, a verbal altercation between 2 individuals relating to a dog bite. We had several calls from the Twin Cities Hospital and 3 calls related to off-road style vehicles in the riverbed. We had no calls for service for burglaries, so that's excellent. We had 3 calls for service for thefts. 1 included a report of stolen hay, but 2 reports were taken out of those 3 calls. 1 call for service for vandalism. The reporting party called in the graffiti on public property, so we notified the removal program. 1 call for service for trespassing, and in this case, the individuals were contacted and told they were trespassing, and they moved on. 2 calls of scams. 1 fraudulent call for requesting updated medical information, but no personal information was given. They just notified us to let us know that was a call they received, and 1 report was taken. Unfortunately, this victim resulted in the loss of $10,000 when we were offering to fix their computer. So, you know, never give information over the phone. And if you look at our website on press releases, because these happen from time to time, so we try to just put it out because people will call us and notify us, but it's certainly nothing new. The story might be different, but they're still soliciting your personal information. So be aware of that, but we do try to stay up to date, and it's ramping up to put it out on our website for a press release. We had 14 calls of suspicious circumstances, several calls of people or companies soliciting services or goods. And 1 report was taken out of those 14. Other calls were regarding prowlers around mailboxes. And several calls were investigated relating to found or stolen mail. We were unable to prove at the time that it was stolen, but it was found, and the quantities of the mail were from Highway 46. Any questions for me?
Thank you.
Okay,
Uh,
thank you.
Excuse me,
Yes.
I don't know if it's related to you, but you know why the speed limit on Main Street was reduced? From 30 to 25?
I don't, but I know 25 is the standard for, areas that are either residential or, business. Have businesses. I know CHP is normally here. He'd probably be able to,
Oh, they're the ones responsible for, okay.
for the most part, yes. Okay.
Any other questions? From the board? No? Public, any questions? Right. Well, thank you, appreciate it, welcome.
Sorry, KSBY did a story on the speed limit change just today,
Oh, okay.
and it's available on their website.
Oh, thank you.
And then we do have a report from CHP, well, he's not here to present it, I think maybe next time here. All right. Next is public comment sections. Members of public may address the board on any items of interest within subject matter jurisdiction of the board, but not on the agenda today. In compliance with the Brown Act, the board cannot discuss or act on items not on the agenda. Any comments from the public that is not on our agenda tonight? Anything on Zoom? No, okay. Let's go to consent agenda. We have two items on the consent agenda. We have the minutes from January 7, 2025, and we have the treasurer's report from November of 2024. Any questions on those related to those items? Any public, any comments or questions on those? All right, I'll come back to the board. Any, if no questions or comments, I'll entertain a motion to approve those two items.
I'll move that we approve the minutes for the January 7th, 2025 meeting and the treasurer's report approving November 2024 treasurer's report.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Directors Peterson,
Yes.
Tyrone. Aye. Logan is absent, Mortensen,
All right.
and Fardonish.
Aye. Okay, great. Motion passes 4-0 with one absent. Business item, Measure A Oversight Committee Annual Report. John Manager?
Yes, good evening. As the board hopefully recalls, when Measure A was passed by the voters of Templeton back in 2018, it enacted an ordinance, and that ordinance we casually refer to as Measure A, but there's 10 or so pages to it. One of the components of that ordinance, or one of the conditions on the parcel tax, is that the district would establish an oversight committee to annually review expenditures and report to you and to the public as to whether or not expenditures made in a given year fell within the guidelines of Measure A. It specifies the limitations. They're still fairly broad, but related to the proceeds from the parcel tax. As you know, Measure A is a special tax to fund 24/7 fire services here in Templeton. So we've, this has been going on now for, I believe this is the fourth year that you've received an annual report on the Measure A proceeds. Each year, the Measure A Oversight Committee meets, reviews the district's budget, reviews planned expenditures, reviews initially draft financial information, and then reviews a copy of the district's audited financial statements and uses that information to make a determination as to whether or not the funds, the Measure A funds that were expended appropriately. The Measure A Oversight Committee is made up of 3 individuals. The chairperson of that committee is Leona Gree, who's here tonight in the audience, and she submitted on behalf of the committee a report that is in your packet, and we can just bring it up to refresh your memory. It's short and direct, and states that in conclusion, the funds have been used as directed by the measure. So we would recommend that that you ask the chairperson any questions that you may have about the report or their work. And if you don't have any and you're content, that you accept the report as prepared.
Thank you. All right, any questions from the board? General manager? All right, I'm gonna go to, public, any questions from the public? Would you, Leona, would you like, make any comments? Or-
It's all in there.
Thank you. Well, thank you for doing this. We appreciate it. Thank you for your help on the committee as well.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, I'll go ahead, bring it back to the board. Any discussion, quick discussion? If not, I will entertain a motion to accept the report.
I just would like to thank the committee for the work that they do. It's, thank you for,
And the fire chief was real helpful. I interviewed him.
thank you.
Yeah, it's very important to have the accountability and especially on the bond measures like this. So, you know, to have you guys, you know, public, to look at it and make sure everything is, you know, we're accountable and transparent, is important, and we appreciate what you do. So thank you so much. All right,
I'll move that we accept the Measure A Oversight Committee report.
yeah, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Directors Peterson,
Yes.
Mortensen,
Yes.
Logan is absent, Tyrone. Yes. And Fardonish.
Great, measure passes 4-0 with one absent. Thank you for coming. Okay, next item is the use of funds for NACI recharge and recovery project. So we'll consider affirming the use of approximately $557,000 of the budgeted $686,000 for NACI recharge recovery project. Chair Manager?
Sure, Lori and I can kind of tag team this.
Oh, okay.
Just to remind the board, because really this is referenced in our report, that this item, or one that's very similar to what's presented tonight, came to you in August, August of last year. And at the time, the board made a amendment to the budget and authorized the use of those funds. It was $686,000 in total, to be utilized to reimburse the county for the county, I'll use the term county in a generic way. It's really the county flood and water control district to design a replacement turnout for our connection to the water, NACI Meadow Water Project. And just to provide some historic background information, we, since the project was constructed, accept water down at the southern end of the district, a site we call Selby, south of the high school, along the river. And we accept NACI water there. And since the NACI project came online, we've essentially borrowed some wastewater infrastructure to percolate that water. That's where we percolate wastewater. We had some excess capacity. We've known for quite a while now that capacity, there isn't an infinite amount of capacity. And as Templeton's wastewater connections grow, and more, that increases, there'll be a diminished capacity or ability to take NACI water. Additionally, over the years, we've increased our subscription to the NACI Meadow Water Project. We were originally at a subscription or participation rate of 250 acre feet. And about 8 years ago, that increased to 406 acre feet. We've never been able to take all that water because of some limitations at the site. Because again, we're kind of borrowing the capacity of the Selby pond site. So in 2017, I'm giving you like more information that's contained here, but in 2017, the district purchased land east of the post office, off of Creekside. We'd already owned about 25 acres there. We purchased an adjacent 25 acres to enable us to put a project together that's depicted on that screen there, where we would relocate the NACI Meadow water turnout, or location where we take it to the site, percolate it in the ground, and then retrieve it in some downstream wells just north on that more recently purchased 25 acres. So that's been the concept that's existed for about 8 years now. We had started some very preliminary work on this project a few years back. The district's initial efforts were to evaluate crossing locations and obtain an easement across the river to tie into the pipeline near this location. The Nasi Meadow pipeline is depicted in that blue line on this map, and it's on the east side of the river. Of course, the district property is on the west side of the river. Hence, it's not super easy to get the water from one side to the other. Anyway, so we had started that effort in 2023, January 9th, 2023. So just over 2 years ago, we had a really significant rain event. At the time, we didn't realize this the day of, but there was really high water levels that existed in the Salinas River all throughout the region. And the existing Nasi Meadow Trail, the one down by Selby, that's also has a river crossing associated. The cover over a portion of the pipeline, what was washed away or nearly washed away, and the top of the pipeline was exposed in a few places. About 3 feet of cover was washed away in an area maybe the size of a football field, at least 100 to 150 feet across the top of the pipeline, kind of gone from that one storm event. So because of that and the risk to the pipeline, the county was able to work with us to develop some alternatives analysis that was indirectly FEMA funded. FEMA will eventually fund that effort, or most of that, 85% or 88% of that effort, to determine whether or not it made sense to relocate that turnout, or how else can we protect the turnout. So those alternatives analysis indicated that relocating that turnout to the site we were already investigating made sense. We could protect the pipeline there better. We could make it much deeper below the river, so it was below any potential scour area, about 25 feet deep in this particular location. So that gets you close to August, I think. Once that alternatives was known earlier this year, that was recommended, the county county staff began working with FEMA to get our project eligible for what's known as hazard mitigation funding, which would fund again nearly 90% of the cost of the project. It was estimated to be about $3 million. So again, late in the summer, we came to you, asked for a budget amendment and authorization to have the county allow us to have the county lead that effort and reimburse them for those costs, with the assumption that we were in good shape to get FEMA reimbursement. It was not a sure thing, but we wanted to be able to move forward and do the planning and the design of the project while FEMA was doing the evaluation, so that we minimized any delays and could proceed. Perhaps just a month or so later, after you made that determination back in August, county staff came to us and stated there's been a little hiccup with FEMA. We're no longer going to move forward with this and recommend the Board of Supervisors award this work to be done, because FEMA is indicating that the likelihood of getting reimbursed is greatly diminished. So I think that brings us to where we're at tonight, which is, so over the past several months, our staff has been working with county staff to determine whether or not there are means to move forward. Right now, we're kind of in a holding pattern. FEMA has not declined to fund the project, but they have not suggested that it can move forward. It's just holding, and it seems like it might just sit there for maybe a year or two, and then eventually just be told no, or the likelihood of being funded is relatively low. We've done some preliminary additional analysis. If in fact we're invited to perform a cost benefits, or maybe it's called a benefits cost analysis. If we're invited, that's what we've kind of requested. Let us, the project, show FEMA that it makes sense to make this investment. And we've done some preliminary work to indicate that, to show that it would exceed that threshold, but FEMA has not yet asked us or allowed us to submit, I was using the word us in a broad sense, but Templeton CSD or the county to submit those calculations, although they've been done in a preliminary way. So in December, we kind of regrouped and said, well, what are our options? Because it seems like we're just kind of waiting now and not sure that's going to move forward. And the county said, well, they would be willing to pick up the pieces, pick up where we left off, and continue the work, as long as we understood that the likelihood of funding is, through FEMA is lower than we thought it was, last summer. And so the item before you tonight does that. If you approve it, we've stripped out some of the components of the original scope of work for WSC. The biggest area that's changed since August is we've taken the design of the percolation pond out of that scope of work, because that was something that we had only included because the county thought it would be beneficial for FEMA to see that we were considering locating the percolation pond out of the flood zone, flood area, which our preliminary design, the one that we had developed several years ago, was and is in the floodplain. But it added a lot of complexity to the design. We don't know much about that upper ground, or whether or not we can percolate water there. That's not been tested, and so it added some costs associated with the design. So that's been removed. So there's some pros and cons about proceeding. The reason we're bringing this to you is because the county's receptive. They want to take the lead on the project. It would essentially be an in-kind replacement of what we have now out of the Selby site. Under this concept, the county would hire the design engineer, and then after we're satisfied, we'd be consulted throughout the process. And after the design is complete, we could give them the go-ahead to initiate construction, regardless of FEMA participation. That's one of the pros. We kind of maintain the momentum, if you will. Another pro is the county staff involvement allows us to remain engaged with FEMA and potentially some other funding sources that we continue to evaluate. We, again, a loose term, our staff and county staff continues to evaluate to determine if there might be some funding available. But if not, we were prepared to essentially do this anyway. The cons are that there are some costs that the county would incur that we hadn't initially expected. The county charges some overhead to do the costs, overhead to run the project. So that would be incurred. But under this arrangement, the county would essentially be more of a turnkey arrangement. The county would do the environmental work. They'd lead the design effort. They would obtain the necessary right of way. We wouldn't need to be involved in that. Just to kind of help explain it, right now, our turnout from the main Nacimiento pipeline to the Selby site, the length of that easement is pretty long. It's like maybe a half a mile. It's pretty far, maybe not quite that, several thousand feet. Is all account as a flood control district easement, not a Templeton CSD easement. So the county would prefer to keep this new turnout under the same sort of criteria, and then we would handle the rest of the project. In other words, they would handle the design to the location where the water comes out of the pipeline and is available for us, and then we would handle the rest of the project, which would be designing the wells. Is that probably is the best one. So there's still other things that need to happen with the percolation basin, the additional wells on the site, and then there's some infrastructure, including some water treatment that is necessary. So we would have to take the lead on that, and we could initiate the design of that work concurrently with the design of the turnout. We just need to know where the pipeline's going to daylight, essentially, where we're going to be able to obtain water.
We don't know that right now. I mean, it's still up in the air.
There is no design for the turnout, only a preliminary design. There are some great things we've learned over the past couple of years. Prior to January of 2023, our concept was our preferred concept was to follow this sort of middle alignment that's shown here. On January 9th, 2023, about maybe 50 or 75 feet of the river just became much wider, and it would have blown our infrastructure out. It's not funny, but it could have been a disastrous situation with regards to that. A massive area of the river was widened due to some problems on a culvert at that location. Additionally, our plan was to only bore or use a technique, horizontal drilling, directional drilling technique under the river itself, and then surface. Once we got onto our property on the outside of the riverbank, and then do trench installation, from there to the pond location. That was the concept anyway. No design existed, but that's what we were costing out. And now I think we're convinced that that's not an ideal arrangement. That's exactly what happened, at the Nasi turnout location. And that trench installed pipeline is the portion that was totally exposed. And so we think it makes sense to, if you look at the other page. This, yep, that conceptual design right there, or preliminary design, I think that's probably the better term. If you see that red segment that runs more or less east and west, it doesn't surface until you're out of the floodplain and on the upper plateau of the site. And so, our recommendation would be to maintain something that it wouldn't be at that exact location, but something along that scale or that alignment, so that there is no trench installed pipeline in the floodplain to minimize the risk of the loss of that cover. The materials that exist, the type of soils that exist at the current Nacimiento turnout location is very similar to the existing conditions at the Creekside property, where it's a loose sandy soil, and yeah, it could be washed away if under similar conditions, seemingly fairly easily. So that's the concept. Justin, Lori, any of us can try to answer any questions that you had. The reason we wanted to bring this forward, even though you already made the determination in August to proceed with using these funds to reimburse the county, is that the assumptions have changed. We no longer believe that we're likely, or more likely than not, to receive FEMA funding. That it's not been ruled out, but I would not want you to walk away with the expectation that we were gonna get FEMA reimbursement. Again, it's not been ruled out, but it would appear to be of limited likelihood as we sit here today. That's the main thing that has changed.
Thank you. Any questions for the general manager?
So we're just basically approving the fact that we're not going to, probably not get reimbursed. I mean, we've already approved this, right?
You have, but I didn't want you, you have approved allowing, using these funds to reimburse the county staff to lead the design effort. But I believe that you approved those based on the information that we provided, which was, we felt really like we had a competitive product. At the time, the county staff was telling us that we had a really strong possibility of FEMA funding. And then in September, middle of September, they came back and go, just hold on real quick. We think we're getting a mixed message or a different set of information. Essentially, the folks that our county staff was working with closely with FEMA on this, because I say on this, there was another segment of the Nacimiento pipeline that was washed out, like not cover washed out, pipeline washed out, like 800 feet pipeline gone, no longer exists. That has always been likely to receive FEMA reimbursement. And when we kind of added our project to that issue, our component of the project, it seemed likely that we could make the same arguments, even though the pipeline itself was not damaged. And once the folks that our county staff were working with seemed to give her that indication that this should be fundable. Once it went to the next level of review, indications were that no, that probably does not exist, even though FEMA has not made a formal determination.
And so the 560,000 is for the design service, to reimburse design for services, but the overall project is still estimated to be about 3 million.
That's right.
And that's only, it's not all of it though.
That's the turnout portion.
Yeah.
Right.
So
So-
then you have to add more, probably another 5 million.
No, and you know what, I can pull up, actually, Laura and I were talking about this earlier. This question comes up, how are we gonna answer it? We had, we had done some estimates, several years ago, and I could read those estimates off to you. But those estimates were derived from inflating original construction costs for the Nacimiento project and turnouts, at the time, including the Templeton turnout. Since, but I can give you what those are. Give me just one moment.
Yeah, in summary, we would have to come back to you guys to ask for another budget adjustment when we know more about the district side of this project and get more information in terms of an engineer's estimate to move forward with that. So we would be revisiting this and our side of the project with some updated numbers, because Jeff was saying he's not super confident with those old numbers because since COVID, a lot has changed in the construction world and a lot of the costs pre-COVID don't really look like what they look like now.
Well, and just like these costs are a lot higher than we were estimating, back then. But I don't wanna try to go from my recollection. Let's see if I can pull it up. So in June of 2021, that's when not that page, the other page was, kind of, brought to you. We had estimated the entire project being about $3.6 million using the most direct alignment cost, with the least direct alignment cost being about $4.3 million. And,
That's the additional part. Or are you talking about?
I'm talking, well, because they were all captured in the same
Okay.
cost,
So
so
it's like
of that. We had for the entire thing, for design for the entire project, we had $585,000. We had about $300,000 for construction management. Total construction cost of about $2 million. Of that, the pipeline, the crossing, the Nacimiento turnout, and the portion that we're talking about now would have been 2 million, about 60% of it. So, looking at these figures, the other components, the construction costs of their components were labeled at 450, 650, 700, roughly $710,000. But, and then there was contingency, construction management and design on top of that. So, not quite half. The other components will be,
Any other questions? So one question I have is, you said the current basin that we are looking at is in the floodplain.
it is.
So there was an option to look at another area, but.
So that
we
this map is
decided-
pretty good.
But you decided to take it out because of the cost and complexity.
Cost, complexity, and lack of certainty that it's going to work. So that location that's shown in this picture here, that little blue box,
Mhm.
that's where that mouse pointer is. That is a location that we physically tested. We dug a test percolation pond, and we took water and we percolated it and we retrieved it at a downstream well to make sure to prove that this concept would work. And we use that information to size the percolation pond, the design. But it happens to be in the floodplain. And the county staff was concerned that by showing in the floodplain, we might not be might not be making the project resilient enough, and therefore, since the FEMA is paying for all this anyway, conceptually,
Yeah.
we ought to look at possibly relocating that to where it's shown kind of here, further to the west.
This line here, this kind of faded cream colored area, that's where my cursor is now, that's where we've researched and tested. They wanted to look at the upper plateau of the 50 acres, that would be on the 25 acres south of Creekside Range. And dig a hole, and in preliminary discussions, we knew it'd have to be a lot deeper because there's a grade difference of about
Maybe
would you
10
say
feet.
eight feet. So going deeper and all of the things involved with that was gonna cost $100,000 just to research. So, and the whole idea is that when the water's percolated, that we would pull it up in wells underneath riverine wells, so river wells. And so the further we get away from the river, it might be less likely that we'll be able to pull up that water later on.
So I mean, what would that mean to our operations, if in case there is a flood and, you know, it gets flooded? So obviously, it's not like our waste, you know, what happened at Selby Ponds where, you know, could be a concern because of sewage spill and things like that, but this is just gonna be nasty water. So is it just gonna be a matter of waiting for everything to settle and clean it up and then, or is there gonna be substantial damage where it's gonna cost a lot more to try to fix?
So if what happened, if the same thing that happened out at Selby happened in January 2023 happened at this location, I think it's very minor, right? In wintertime, we're not using the Nasi water anyways. There'd be some cleanup similar to what we did at Selby, very, very minor. It's possible though, that if the river had, you know, flowed higher and faster for a longer period of time, the damage could be more severe. You might have to regrade the whole thing or excavate fill or a substantial amount of fill that could have come into that area. It is in the floodplain. It's expected to have, you know, on January 9th, the water rose, if you go to the other picture, January or other, yeah, there. So our current, that's not super great. So in that blown up box that you see on the corner there, the current deep well, water rose up, water came out of the river onto the walls of that deep well. I wouldn't say it flooded it, but we had river water on the surface at about that location. And if you look at the approximate location where the percolation pond is, we could have had some surface water at or near the top of the percolation pond on January 9th.
Okay, so still, okay. And that was a pretty bad day, so.
It was a bad day. It's not,
So hopefully,
it was a bad
I
day.
think this all moved, all of this and widened. And so that probably actually helped this Creekside site
no,
significantly. And then downstream in Pass Robles, there's way more significant rising of the waters.
okay,
As it narrows, especially at 13th Street Bridge. And so you saw it was wide here and then you went to Pass
Yes.
Robles and it got more narrow and raised course.
okay.
So it kind of helped us that they had more room in the riverbed.
So I'm just looking at trying to see the risk and benefits of it, so it seems like it's worth taking the risk.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert about what happens under the ground. But it will be more expensive without a doubt to construct the pond at the upper plateau. And it's unlikely to work as well.
Okay.
The soils become less sandy the further away you get from the river in general.
And there are flood mitigations in the site.
Yeah, well, that's, so you're gonna start talking about not putting the pipeline trench installed in the flood area. I would be we're gonna, you know, originally our plan was to locate all that infrastructure down in this existing fenced yard. That's that little, you know, pop-out box that says enlarged view. There's filtration and a chlorine contact tank that's necessary. I would not pursue locating it there. I'd move the infrastructure up and out of the way so that it's not likely to ever flood. It's not a lot, it's gonna cost more, but not a lot more to do that, and that would give at least the most expensive infrastructure a lot more protection.
And maybe we could put like, is it possible like retaining wall or something like that?
We'll study what kind of design elements are necessary. The pond that we dug was not elevated, it didn't have it was not elevated, right? It was just dug into the ground. We'll see what the design calls for when we build this and if there's, if we need to protect it. This site is different than Selby. At Selby, we're at the intersection of a major creek and the river. And so we have water coming across the site at two directions. This site does not exhibit that. There is no creek really that feeds the Salinas River at our site. So the water is more or less coming just from the south to the north.
Is this a site that the county prefers to do? If
This
we
is-
wanted to do it elsewhere, would they still? do it?
So the county's alternative analysis shows that this is the preferred site, but they got to that conclusion based on information that we provided.
And it's-
Not because of not because of our information solely, but because this
Well,
was one
I think the
option.
fact that the county is doing it is gonna save Lori a lot of grief and time.
Yeah, I think that's I think there should
And that's
be.
be worth the $2 more, I think, so.
Well, and I will say that there was a comment that maybe this county should have been heading it up from an earlier time because it is their facility. So technically the turnout from the connection to the main pipeline to the handoff location, as you mentioned with the easement, the long easement, they technically maintain that portion even after it's constructed, and we do pay them as a part of being a participant in that. So she was sort of saying, oh, we probably wanted to head up the design anyway. So I think it's a win-win, especially if this will, we're not pulling ourselves out of the running for FEMA or other possible funding options, and they have a lot of background in that and how to shape projects so that they can get funding. So I think that's a plus for the district.
That's my question is, so the 100,000 or so, that 129 that is being removed because we're not gonna include a study of the second location. In what sounds like the unlikely event, but should FEMA come back and say, this is a project we would like to support, but they wanted that other location, would we be able to pivot and have that
Yeah, I think
study back?
we can. We just.
Yeah, well, and I was even just thinking while we were talking is that we have this lower location, but we could have two as options. We can always research or.
The services that the
design.
county's gonna be providing, that we're approving to reimburse would not be undone if we decided to eventually go back and put investment in the other location. Okay.
We could add to the scope. I think that's what
We
you're
can,
saying.
yeah.
Yeah, I think we can. I just don't think it's likely gonna work.
Yeah.
So I don't wanna, I went along with it when somebody else was gonna pay for that effort. And
Yeah.
I'm not recommending I think it's a gamble. It's not a very good return.
The other detail of this is that the pond specifically is actually our responsibility, 100%. So county's like, yeah, we think you should put the pond here or there based on our knowledge of, what hazard mitigation, but technically it's TCSD's facility from the handoff point of the Nacimiento water. So then it goes into Perk Pond and then it goes into our wells. So we really have that flexibility of choosing wherever we want to put it.
Yep.
So if you as the board, somehow want to make that investment and research that upper plateau, then we have that option.
I don't think at this time.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing was by keeping it in the FEMA analysis, the design analysis, they could have funded the construction of the pond if it got that far, if FEMA was. So of course that was attractive. It was like, okay, if it works and they're gonna fund it,
Right.
then yes, we'll build it here.
Yeah.
But if it doesn't work, then that wasn't gonna be a location that was suitable either way.
I'm gonna go to public. Any questions from public? Jeff?
Sure, thank you, Jeff English. wanted to just say that this is something I recommend that you move forward with. This is your board's previous long-term water strategy. And this is a project that we've been talking about for a long time to actually take full advantage of the full allocation of Nasumi water. And that we should just keep moving forward and not delay. I do encourage the county to be, let's keep the screws down and make sure that their costs, there's a way that the county can balloon some of our costs. And so controlling and that would be important. Anyway, I would recommend that the board move forward with this item tonight.
Thank you, appreciate your comment. Okay, so I'm gonna come back to the board, any comments?
I think one of my issues is that if we delay this, we're gonna see the costs increase.
Yes.
I mean, I do not foresee us having a lower cost in the future, so moving forward, I would recommend it as well.
Yeah, my only comment is obviously it's hard to, pay the county that additional money, but as you mentioned, I think with the staff that we have, it's gonna take a lot of pressure off of them. Plus, I think you guys are gonna be then able to concentrate on what we need to do on our part, on our section. So, yes, we're paying a little bit more money, but, I think long-term, it's gonna be the best, scenario. And let the county deal with the easements and negotiations as well as the construction and things like that. So yeah, I'm for moving forward on this as well. So, any other comments? Okay, so if there are no other comments, I'll go ahead and I'll entertain a motion on this item to affirm our commitment for reimbursing the county.
I'll make a motion to approve firming these approximately $557,000 reflected $686,000 to the Nacimiento Recharge Recovery Project. Reimburse the county flood control district for designing the return home.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Okay, perhaps. Okay, roll call, please.
Directors Mortensen,
Aye.
Tyrone,
Aye.
Logan is absent, Peterson,
Yes.
and Fardonish.
Aye. Okay, motion passes 4-0 with one absent.
Thank you. Just before you move on, I may not have touched on it, or we may not have touched on it earlier. The county staff is anticipating taking this item to the Board of Supervisors for a budget adjustment at the end of February. So we should know by the end of February whether the counties can proceed with the project.
Okay, great. And then you guys don't have any timeline.
I don't have an updated timeline, but I know WSC was anxious to get started on this. When we were kind of in the middle of it 8 months ago, this was to proceed right away.
Okay. That's
Hey, Jeff, why wouldn't the county proceed with this?
The Board of Supervisors has to approve a budget amendment to fund it.
And aren't they in a position that they have to?
Um,
To fund, to fund this?
I think they put pause on the, what they call bar budget.
and your request
budget
authorization or something.
Authorization requests because of the language in their request that was included FEMA funding.
Okay.
And so when we asked them, can we change that request to remove the language about FEMA to just say that, TCSD will reimburse? They were like, oh yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, I don't
And so it was very quick, a couple of days, they got everything adjusted and back on.
I see no reason why they wouldn't. We're the one that was at risk, right? We're funding it. They're essentially a pass-through, right? We're agreeing to reimburse their costs, so they're not really out anything, but they still have to get explicit authorization to spend the money to begin with.
This item isn't in their budget for this year, so that's, they're aware of it, but it wasn't approved.
Okay. Next item, review of 2020 and 2023 strategic plan, part 3.
Okay,
This is the third part of our review.
well. Okay, so, the board has, seen, several components of the strategic plan over the last, 6 weeks or so, 4 weeks, or since December. last meeting 2 weeks ago, we reviewed approximately half of the strategic goals and core strategies. We're prepared tonight to review the remaining half, and I'm just scrolling down as I'm talking to get there since the list brought us up to the beginning of the plan. So, tonight we're reviewing, primarily the utilities related, strategic goals, and then a couple of kind of over, some, larger issues, broader issues at the end of it. And again, both Justin and Lori and I are all here to answer questions that you might have about these particular items, just to help frame, to sort of frame your thoughts. These were drafted in February of 2020, so almost 5 years ago, just barely pre-COVID, adopted a few months later, but the actual texts were drafted at a meeting in February 2020. So I'll just read it. Enhance, under the water strategic goal, enhance reliability and availability of water resources. This strategy leads to the fulfillment of the strategic goal. And the first one being build upon and further develop the integrated water resources strategic plan that quantifies supplies, identifies key actions, and develops needed policies to serve current and future needs, including options and plan for infrastructure to use not detrimental water. So maybe timing is good, at least for that very last little piece. Just there's a term in here that some of you probably have never heard: integrated water resources strategic plan. That was a project that came out of the last water and wastewater master plan update that was adopted in 2013. It was on the water component only, and identified about a dozen items that the plan felt were inadequate or were not able to be addressed during the development of that master plan update. We at the staff level and through the board up through the state had kind of broken those dozen or so items down into kind of high, medium, and low priority. And we tackled the high priority items within the first few years. That included things like the water buffer model, et cetera. When we last updated the board on this particular item about 3 years ago, Tina Meyer and I had recommended that the remaining components of the integrated water resource strategic plan be folded in or incorporated into the next water master plan. At the time, we thought we'd have that underway by now. We had a little delay in that, but we have since at the staff level folded those components into the RFP so they can be completed as a part of the next master planning effort. Probably the bigger and more concrete item here is that portion that's added in parentheses, including options and plan for infrastructure to use Nacimiento water. That is the Nacimiento recharge recovery project that we covered some of just a moment ago. So that is the location where we intend to use that water, and that it's been, I think, consistent now for about 6 years in terms of the plan.
Do we have an ATA, an integrated water resource strategic plan revision?
It'll be done with the water master plan update. So that effort, what do you think, this spring should start?
So we're bringing the RFP for the water and wastewater master plans to the, it's called the Water and Wastewater Committee, Utilities Committee on February 5th. And so we're gonna get some input from that committee to finalize that RFP and go out, probably end of February-ish, if all goes well, to try to get a consultant in to start that effort. And then we'll have a timeline of how long that effort is gonna take. After we get the results of the RFP, we'll be coming to the board to show you the results and make a decision for that consultant, and getting some more information into how long that'll take. That'll give us more information on how they're gonna set up, all these projects that follow from the master plan effort, which will include these items in the strategic plan.
Okay, so the next water goal, pretty belated, develop a plan for full Nacimiento allocation. This strategy leads to the fulfillment of this goal, define the methodology and action steps necessary to achieve full Nasi Meadow allocation percolation. A mouthful there. So again, just to sort of help frame this, back in, since the beginning of time, the Nasi Meadow project came online, we had the turnout. We've been 15 years, but we have a turnout constructed at the Selby site. All my term has been, we've used sort of borrowed infrastructure that was never a good permanent plan, because that's where the district is permitted to discharge wastewater. That is the only place we're permitted to discharge wastewater where we can use it later on. So it's always in the district's, always been in the district's best interest to try to percolate all of its wastewater at that site, because it's a water supply for future use. And so in 2019, however, as we got ready to bring on what we called the East Side Force Main Project, or the Upper Salinas Conjunctive Reuse Project, where prior to 2019, about 2/3 of the wastewater that was generated in Templeton went to Paso Robles, and it was treated there. We paid the city of Paso Robles to treat it, and it was lost as a water supply to us. We brought that wastewater back, and so that increased the amount of wastewater we were generating by a pretty significant margin, by about 200%. And so in anticipation of that, we intentionally took Nasi Meadow offline and stopped taking it for about 2 years. So we can't take Nasi water. We need to ensure that we have capacity for the wastewater. And then the development of this goal occurred during that window of time when we were intentionally not taking Nasi Meadow water. Since then, we've been able to resume the taking of some Nasi Meadow water. And over the past now 4 years, 21, 22, 23, and 24, we've taken a portion of our Nasi Meadow allocation and percolated it. But again, we have a 406 acre foot allocation. And over those past 4 years, we've taken between, like, say 80 and 130-ish acre feet. I think that's somewhere each year's been a little different. It depends on how much capacity we have, how wet it is, how high the groundwater is. There's a number of factors that determine the amount of water we can percolate at that site. So we've been able to resume taking Nasi Meadow water over the past 4 years, and we're still going to be able to, even before the Creekside project or the Nasi Recharge and Recovery project's online. But that Nasi Recharge and Recovery project is our long-term plan for this. That pond has been preliminarily designed, I guess conceptually designed, to take all 406 acre feet over about a 4-month period of time. So we can essentially peak our usage of Nasi water, try to take it when our water demand is the highest. So that's where that's the methodology.
I can add a little bit to that. On the technical end, Tina did do quite a bit of work with our hydrogeologists to actually model this percolation pond and start conversations with the Department of Drinking Water about requirements. And so in the years following this, she did put quite a bit of effort into getting the technical aspects dialed in for the pond and the location that we spoke about before. So I think Tina really took this to heart and led us to a point where we are now, so we can really jump into design in that location.
Any questions before we move on? Any questions from public on this? Go ahead. No.
One, I support the strategies that you put together and the staff has put together over the years. I think the district has a good plan. I don't want to lose the fact that we're going to be we will be in a drought condition, or maybe, and not to lose sight of that, our ability to continue our drought resiliency by lowering our water supply through some of our management strategies for lowering our water. So anyway, don't want to lose sight of that.
Okay, the next one is a wastewater goal, complete projects that allow for the full percolation and retrieval of 100% of the wastewater effluent. These strategies lead to the fulfillment of that goal. The first, again, let me try to frame the time. We were about 6 months into going live with the East Side Force Main project. Again, the wastewater plant was designed and constructed to treat about 600,000 gallons a day, but we were only receiving about 150,000 gallons a day prior to 2019. We brought that project online, that jumped up to somewhere in the neighborhood of 400,000 gallons a day. It varies every day, a little different, but somewhere in the neighborhood of that. So about tripled the volume when we brought that East Side Force Main water back, and the plant was upset. We were getting incomplete treatment. We were having high, exceeding our limits of discharge. Our ability to percolate this fairly, the quality of the wastewater didn't meet the quality of the treated wastewater didn't meet our expectations. And because of that, because of the quality wasn't good enough, essentially, we weren't able to percolate it, and we had to use our spray field. We have property at the wastewater plant, but we're permitted to operate a spray field. It's another way of discharging, but there's not any value to that water. It's just mostly just evaporated, and we cannot claim it or utilize it for a water supply. So we're motivated not to do that. So that's the circumstances we were facing. We were trying some emergency measures along this time period. We had added some ponds that were designed for storage. We were adding treatment. We were adding aeration to the ponds, altering the flows between the ponds in these sort of emergency or reactionary measures to see if we can improve the treatment process. So that's the situation we were in February of 2020. And so when it said complete wastewater discharge feasibility evaluation, we were focused on looking at technologies that would improve the amount of suspended solids in the wastewater to improve percolation capability. And we did that. We reviewed several different technologies. And then in 2022, I believe, we actually conducted this pilot testing of the preferred technology. It's a sand filter that recycled the use of sand. It was a technology that we had our eyes on for several years. Justin was here when that occurred. However, by the time that we did the pilot testing, actually, I think we had a committee meeting out there where the pilot test took place. By the time we had the testing performed, the quality of the wastewater had improved pretty dramatically as a result of those changes. So much so that we were no longer having challenges with percolating the water. It wasn't perfect, but we were able to percolate all the water that came into the wastewater treatment plant. And so therefore, while the pilot testing was effective, the quality of water that we're putting into the filter improved. It was already good enough to not need that additional filtration. And so we've proven that technology will work for us, but it's not really needed. And since then, we have been able to percolate 100%. As a matter of fact, since 2021, we've percolated every gallon of wastewater that was treated all went to Selby eventually. There are times we have to hold water at the wastewater plant due to wet conditions. Some of that due to the regulatory or some rules that we have about when we can discharge. But we have not needed to utilize the spray field in 4 years, more than 4 years. So we are achieving 100% percolation of our wastewater. Not necessarily because of this installation, but just because of improved treatment.
Good job, Jess.
Yeah, Jessica, good job.
This next one, wastewater strategic goal, improve TCSD wastewater source control. These strategies lead to the fulfillment of this goal. Again, to sort of frame the discussion. In the several years leading up to the year 2000, we had brought on a lot of additional wineries within the district and breweries, food processing kind of organizations. And most of the system we had, the control system we had in place for all but a couple was this program called a zero discharge permit or a zero discharge system. And what this meant was, businesses that signed up for the zero discharge stated that they would separate their effluent, and for their domestic effluent, the toilet water, the sink water, that kind of thing would flow into the district's wastewater system, and their processed water, stuff related to winery wash water, winery processing, brewery processing, would be segregated and hauled off. The wineries have special locations they can take it, et cetera. There are also industrial locations that some of this waste can go to, although it's costly to truck it. And what we had found was that although many of these businesses had signed up for this program, they weren't utilizing it reliably. And some of that water was making its way back into the district's treatment system or waste, sewer system without pretreatment. And it exceeded our limitations pretty significantly, and it led to some upsets at the wastewater plant. Again, we're in that window of time when we had just brought on this east side wastewater, so we were seeing the effects of the wastewater plant that we had not really seen before. This stuff was really going to Paso Robles prior to 2019. So that's the circumstances. So prioritize and implement wastewater source discharge permitting, and then also including the FOG program and industrial discharge limits. So shortly after this core strategy was developed, the district brought on the Wallace Group as a consultant to lead our source discharge program. And we believe that that's been very effective, or a lot more effective than what we were doing before. And we've got a much better handle on it. We have a number of additional we have a few more pre-treatment systems online now than we did previously, and there's active annual or more frequent inspections. And we've got most of our businesses that need some sort of fat, oil, and grease, like grease interceptors, to have those installed and inspected and ensure that they're being cleaned periodically, et cetera. And we've had to step up our enforcement. And so several of those items have come to the board over the last couple of years in terms of enforcement protocols. And we, particularly in the past year, have had quite a bit of enforcement actions taken against some of these businesses who have not fully complied with their discharge limits. So this is I think we've got a much better handle on this program, even though it's not something that we can just say is complete and done and we can walk away from. It requires ongoing interaction with the businesses and enforcement and education. The second core strategy is ensure that all the district's effluent is treated and discharged. So it is, I mean, that's what our wastewater treatment system does. It treats this water, and it is, as I mentioned to you, all of the water has been discharged at the Selby site. That was again, just understand the circumstances. We were when this goal or this was written, we were kind of just shortly after we had taken on all that east side flows, and we were dealing with some challenges. And then the third one, identify, address, and improve I&I or inflow and infiltration problem areas. This is something that we've kind of continuously battled, and probably much like the source control will always be an issue during major storm events. In particular, we have increases in inflows that can lead to things like sewage spills if the system gets overwhelmed. January 9th put us to a really great test. We did not have a sewage spill that day. An untreated wastewater sewage spill. We still made the news, but that was treated wastewater. But that's pretty remarkable, actually, given the test of the day. But we did face really increased flows during those major storm events and continue to do so. I think we've got a much better handle on where we have I&I problems. These are things like cross connections or drain lines that have been cut in by private residents, and ensuring that those remain capped and unavailable to drain, like storm drain systems. We have folks that will drain like low-lying driveways and things like that through like a clean out. Well, that's not, can't do that. We don't have the capacity in the sewer system to take storm drain water. So I&I is still a challenge for us and for really all wastewater systems. And, although I think in general, we've got a good handle on the real troublesome areas. We've kind of talked about how we can incorporate further I&I study into the water and wastewater, master plan update. I don't know if it'll rise to a high priority project coming out of that update, but time will tell.
Any questions on the wastewater strategies that we had adopted? Any questions or comments from public on that? No? Okay, I'm back.
This next compliance strategy is essentially a wastewater related item as well. Ensure that all areas of TCSD operations meet or exceed regulatory standards. That sounds very broad. But the core strategies were all related to wastewater control, odor in the wastewater collection system. Again, let me try to frame that discussion so you, have a better sense of what this was speaking of. Over many years, there's been some periodic odor related issues, and we've taken steps to reduce those through various techniques, more frequent cleaning. And then maybe 10 years or so ago, 10 or 12 years ago, we added a vacuum fan at the wastewater plant to try to create a vacuum in the last little segment of the district's main line. So as we had some odor complaints that were originating pretty near the wastewater plant. And that's been fairly effective. When we brought the East Side Force Main project online, almost immediately we started receiving complaints and observed a situation where we had odors that were pronounced pretty close to the intersection of Bennett and Las Tablas. And that happens to be where the East Side Force Main discharges into a gravity line and makes its final, makes the last several hundred foot distance to the west side lift station where it gets pumped to the wastewater plant. And that's the circumstance we were facing. And the odors were apparent. These were not infrequent, or they were obvious. They seemed to happen, especially in warmer months, every time the pumps would kick on to push water through that last section of Force Main. And so it was clear as we were getting some odors that were built up in the gravity line, and when the Force Main kicked on, it would displace that air. It would come up to the manholes and create this pretty obvious odor in that vicinity. So sort of between the Chevron station and along Las Tablas and Bennett by the park and ride, that was the vicinity where the odors were obvious. So we initially tried a vacuum filtration system at that location. We leased this device, looked like a little tank that had a vacuum, created a suction and filtered that air through a carbon filter. And we leased that for 3 years. And during the lease period, we changed out the media once, and it was effective in so much that when it went offline for various reasons, we had a power outage or the carbon filter was getting plugged up, we got the odor complaints would come back. So about 2 years ago, the lease on that was up. Sounded about right? Yeah, about June, I'd say about May of 2023 was up. And so that device was returned or removed. And we installed a chemical-based system at the Lift Station 3 site. This was a little more investment on the district's part. And we had some hiccups getting it online originally and getting it kind of dialed in. But for approximately the past year, I think it's worked pretty reliably. We use it's a more expensive solution because the chemical agent isn't cheap, and we go through, and especially in the summer months, quite a bit of it. But we're able to adjust the dosage based on weather and other factors. And so the idea is that we neutralize prevent those odors from forming at that location. And I think it's been much more effective than nothing, certainly. And I'm trying to remember the last time that I was aware of a complaint at that location. I think it's probably been at least a year.
Wonderful, thank you. Any questions on that?
There's two others here that are not that related. The second one is says correct, incomplete wastewater treatment. Again, framing that discussion, we had brought on the East Side Force Main Water, and there were a number of things, upsets at the plant. And we were in the midst of making those changes during this time, and pretty quickly in 2020, that was essentially kind of corrected. And we actually have not had to make very many changes to the plant's operation in the past couple of years. We haven't had the air, we kind of got the system kind of dialed in terms of where the aerators were and where treatment existed. And have been utilizing that and now have a complete treatment system. We've also kind of perfected the depths of the ponds and where we're taking water out to dispose of in terms of grabbing the best water that's available to percolate. The most complete treated water. Well, that's probably not the right way of saying that, but anyway, if the pond is a dozen feet deep, there'll be places in the pond where better wastewater can be found. So that's really been totally completed. And then the final one, improve the sustainability and energy efficiency of the wastewater treatment plant. We've evaluated options for the wastewater treatment plant. As a matter of fact, I worked with one company that wanted to, lease pond space to put floating PV system up, and then a law changed and that was no longer viable. We've examined our abilities to do some net energy metering and install a single location PV system and do some net energy metering. And essentially, the folks that I've started working with just disappear. We're not a very big power user in terms of utility scale, and they don't view the payback as being very attractive. So there's still some options at the wastewater plant, and I think maybe we'll get something out of the master plan in terms of evaluation of energy. We don't actually use a lot of energy, again, compared to like a typical wastewater. We have a very simple plant today, and so it's pretty energy efficient. We have aeration, not a lot of pumps, not a lot of mechanical systems at the plant. Most of our energy is really used on the water side and at the wastewater lift stations, but we don't have a lot of land.
So how do you propose, I know we've talked a lot about the master plan and things like that, so how do you propose we move forward with doing our strategic plan if we don't have the master plan? In front of us, are you guys gonna bring?
Well, we'll have the elements that are expected, we have a draft of the RFP of the master plan.
That would be.
I think the biggest thing is the master plan, the district's water and wastewater systems have changed pretty dramatically in the past decade. We have more Nacimiento water. We've got a plan to use it fully. On the wastewater system, we're treating 2.5 times the amount of wastewater that we were a dozen years ago. There's just a lot of elements from the 2013 master plan that are just not applicable any longer.
Sense. Yeah. Move on to the next section.
All right, we covered all these ones that are not highlighted last time. And then there are just a couple more. So we'll start here, this top one that says develop a TCSD strategic plan and regularly track its progress towards achieving the district vision by June 30th, 2023. The strategies below lead to this goal. Strategic plan is reviewed annually by the board to ensure continuing relevance of the district's vision and core strategies. This was done in 2021 and 2022 following the adoption of the plan. It was not done in the last couple of years. The board did review it in the first couple of years following the development of the plan. District progress towards implementation, achieving its core strategies reviewed quarterly by the board, and corrective action is taken if necessary. So again, I think we were a little late the last couple of years. We haven't been doing those updates, and therefore, that second bullet, you haven't been reviewing this. The board hasn't been reviewing this quarterly.
What did corrective action mean, just?
Adjusting the strategies. Obviously, we're, a year and a half past June 30th, 2023, so I think you can, you can judge, many of these items were complete by June 30th, 2023. Others we made progress on, but were not achieved. And we're now, probably by the time you tackle the next strategic plan will be a couple of years past that date, that June 30th, 2023 date. And there was a final goal here, strategic goal, community strategic goal. Again, I just left these for last because they're kind of broad items. The TCSD board and staff regularly foster the spirit of community pride that's central to sustaining a vibrant future for Templeton. The strategies below lead to the fulfillment of that strategic goal. So there were five, sorry. Maintain district presence at key community events. July 4th, Founders Day, Wine Festival were examples given. I want to sort of frame this. Again, this goal was developed pre-COVID. And then of course we hit COVID, all the events were off for a period of time. And unfortunately, since then, a number of the providers that provided the community events have gone away. So for example, the Chamber of Commerce, Templeton Chamber of Commerce used to lead the Founders Day Street Fair. The chamber no longer exists. The Founders Day Street Fair no longer exists. The Founders Day is a museum put on event at this point. It's not a broader community. It's still a community event, but it's hosted by the museum. It's for the museum. It no longer includes the sort of street fair component. The wine festival, we used to have a Templeton Wine Festival, Templeton Beer Festival. We had Templeton Oktoberfest. All of those kind of items were put on by the Chamber of Commerce. And since the chamber is gone or merged with Paso Robles Chamber, those events don't exist any longer. So so at least the sample events don't exist. Obviously the July 4th parade still exists. The Firefighters Association still hosts the pancake breakfast on July 4th. But the other community events are kind of large. Those ones that are identified don't exist any longer. The second strategy is link the district's identity with the community's identity. And, my recollection is it's a tiny bit fuzzy here, but I think this was coming about like embracing green as the community color. Some of the examples I would use, for example, we have a partnership with the school district to allow the school district to hang the Templeton T flags along Main Street. Those are district flagpole holders. And we use them during patriotic events, like the district puts up the 4th of July flags. Also, that's a community spirit item. We put those up during patriotic holidays like Flag Day, 4th of July, Veterans Day, etc. So the school district puts up the Templeton community flags on Main Street. So that's one very minor way I think that we achieve this. The third item, provide support services at community events. I think that might be fairly related to the first item. Some of those events don't exist anymore. And so I think you need to determine, are there other means of achieving this goal in the long term if the community events are not going to exist, or maybe we focus our efforts at events that we have more control of, TCSD sponsored or held events. Invite the public to district open house events, such as at the fire station or here in the boardroom. And actually, the fire station has held an open house every year, except for 2024, the 2021, 22, and 23. Those were held during the fire prevention week, and reasonably well attended. There were demonstrations of like cooking fires or rescues from vehicles. Those were things that were demonstrated at those open house events.
And the fire department is also doing during the Christmas time.
Yeah, the Santa parade, for
Yeah,
sure.
Santa
Yeah,
parade.
that's a well.
Yeah, that's something that was developed,
Yeah, since
that-
the.
some things went away, we added something.
And then the final one here is the TCSD board members maintain community visibility. No wearing your cloaks. So that covers the remaining strategic goals and core strategies.
Wonderful. Any questions on those? All right, so that finishes it up. And I just want to thank Justin and Lori for being here tonight. And I hope this kind of, obviously you guys were not involved with this, so hopefully this kind of gives you an idea of what we want to, hopefully how we want to move forward. But definitely when it's time for them, the strategic plan session that we're gonna have for water and wastewater, I'm hoping that you guys will come and tell us what your vision is for the next 3 years, where you see our challenges and, with the regulations and things like that. So definitely your input is gonna be highly valued, that we need, well, I wanna, hear from you guys. We wanna hear from you on how, where we should put down our strategic goals. So, well, thanks for coming tonight. Appreciate that. Okay, so I think we are done with this item. And then we are moving to the next item, which is strategic planning process discussion. So this is where we are going to discuss how we want to move forward. General manager has a report.
Sure, I'm happy. So as you know, you've been reviewing the 2023 strategic plan over the last 3 board meetings. And in anticipation of your development of a new strategic plan for Templeton CSD, the board president and I met, and I suggested that we have a discussion about how we go about that process. So there's agreement and consensus about how we wish to move forward. And then we can kick the process off once that has been established. So we reviewed, again, our existing strategic plan. That the last plan we put together, and I guess for the benefit of particularly of those who were not involved in the development of the 2020-2023 plan, it was about a 6-month effort from the time we brought on a consultant until we adopted the plan. So a fairly involved effort, not all of that by the board. Some of the work was done kind of behind the scenes, but you ended up with a pretty, kind of a big document. And then a lot of things changed right after adopting it. And so right after you held that workshop, COVID hit. And I think that there were, some more pressing things on everybody's mind, and maybe not enough attention was spent kind of making some sort of wrapping it up. And the board had gone through a couple of cycles of strategic planning where I think maybe not everybody was thrilled about the outcome, and not to place any blame or anything, but the days did not end well. The workshop days didn't end very well, and so there probably was not as much attention to some of the items that in there than there could have been under more ideal circumstances. So since 2020, there has not been a strategic planning effort undertaken by the board, and there does not exist this year a budget to hire like a facilitator to lead an effort like we've done in the past, like we had done for several years in the past up until 2020. So the board president kind of outlined, his vision to me anyway, so I could put it in paper, put it in writing and present that to all of you, and I'll just kind of go through these bullets. So one concept the proposal is the board would hold strategic planning workshops over a period of about 3 months during special meetings held before board meetings. So instead of devoting a Saturday or multiple weekend days or full days to this, it can be broken up into smaller segments and done in a couple hours at a time. And that could start as soon as your next meeting. Additional time could be programmed at the end of regular meetings on the same night. So if, for example, you just simply ran out of time, but there were still important topics on the same, important items discussed on the same topic, we could agendize those at the regular meeting and use that time if needed, much in the same way we have used your budget workshop in years past, so that you don't have to wait 2 weeks to continue talking about the same topic. The first one could start with the review of the mission statement, and core values. Those were something that you reviewed back in December. And we think we narrowed, there was a couple of topics that you wanted to discuss further on those areas, but maybe it wouldn't be a real significant amount of time to tackle those. And then hit the Parks and Recreation goal development during the very first week. Subsequent workshops would tackle all the other service areas, including fire, emergency services, water, wastewater, and then some. And then topics that would cover more than one service area, such as administration or things that were sort of district-wide. We do anticipate those would come up and could be handled at the end. Workshop discussions would hopefully be kept at a high level, interactive, informal, avoid spending too much time wordsmithing language during the workshops. We ran into some problems with that in the past where we get caught up on should that say "and" or "a" or how should it be formatted, and thought that maybe we could avoid that. Just take good notes and deal with those things kind of between meetings instead of taking up all of your board time. Staff for the areas of focus we seated with the board in this room. All the workshops could be held here. Everything would be recorded and available through Zoom, with public participation and comments at the beginning and the end and at other appropriate intervals. One of the items that was identified was our template, particularly for goal development, was kind of, we really had kind of this cumbersome process through the 2020-2023 plan. And so it looked at, okay, what are some examples? How can we come up with a template for goal development? And so we've put together a draft. It's an attachment to this handout to determine whether or not this is something you'd like to move forward with, where, goals could be big and broad and cover, kind of like they are now, if that's the way you want to keep them, but you would have specific objectives and specific supporting actions for each of those objectives, visible in one place and in a format that can be monitored and tracked without creating another document. So that you knew what the format would be from the get-go. The board president would consider establishing an ad hoc committee. So to tackle developing the final language. So again, the board wouldn't have to be distracted by wordsmithing. The ad hoc committee, if needed, could meet between workshops to fine-tune language from the prior workshops. So if you didn't want to wait until it was all done, that work could start immediately. The ad hoc committee could draft the vision statement for board consideration after the goals are developed. You reviewed the vision statement, the existing one, back in December, and thought was, okay, we had to scrap that, come up with something else, and you do so at the end of this process. The ad hoc committee could review the overall document, the language, the format of the presentation, ensure that's ready for consideration by the board to adopt at the end of this process, likely in April. And the ad hoc committee then could review and the strategic planning process, document it, and make recommendations about ways to improve it going forward. Perhaps this kind of format worked great, and you just want to track, just come up with a way of tracking it, reviewing it in every 6 months or every year, or make any minor tweaks to the system. Or perhaps you decide the ad hoc committee would say, you know what, we really didn't like this process. We think we should do something different. And that way we'd set ourselves up for success going forward. So that's the outline of what's been proposed. I'm noting in here as well that particularly if we follow a format similar to what's attached, that we be mindful to develop SMART goals, things that are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and ensure that these are items that we can essentially decide if we achieved or not, instead of being overly ambiguous or not specific enough or measurable enough. So those are just some of my thoughts on this. So this item is again for your discussion and to determine if there's consensus about how to move forward.
Okay, great, thank you. Any questions on this? The process?
Yeah, I have a number. First, I'd like to thank Naveed. I think you did a great job here, and Shows, to me anyway, that how concerned you really are and the effort you put into this. And also, Jeff, I guess my concern is that where I used to work, we used to have a board offsite meeting with the board every year, and it would be offsite, it would be 2.5 days. Back in the day, I was always against things like that, but I learned to see that they were very valuable. My concern is that breaking this up into 4 months, 4 hours a month, 2 hours, to me is, I don't know, I could go with this. I mean, I wouldn't, if everybody likes it, I could go with it, but I think 2 hours twice a month, to me, is not sufficient. I mean, you get right in the middle of something, and if you're all excited about what you're doing, and then you have to stop, come back 2 months later, or I mean, 2 weeks later, and I'm sure none of us are gonna like spending the 2 hours here and then having to come back after the meeting. I mean, you're talking about 4 hours now, meetings, at least 4-hour meetings. I'm not sure the staff would like to do that either. I mean, I would really prefer that we would take maybe a half a day, 3 or 4 times in this period, and go somewhere else. I mean, I think it's been proven that being somewhere off-site, you pay more attention to what you're doing. There's more questions and things to go on. And even if we went down like we did the last time to the sheriff's department. Again, I'm not against this, but I mean, I think the things you're trying to accomplish here, I'm 100% behind. Wordsmithing, that's never been my forte. So, you know, if somebody else the chance to do that is fine with me. And I think we need to get more staff or whatever involved. And I mean, to me, I mean, speaking for myself, if I'm working all day and then I gotta come in the afternoon for 2 hours and talk about something, I'd be more inclined to be more excited and have more information available if we did it offsite, you know. And I know that's asking a lot, but I mean, again, I come from a culture where we did it every year, and you know, I think I can see the results coming out better that way. Anyway, that's just my opinion. Also, I'm not sure about. Seems like you're putting a lot of work on an ad hoc committee, and I'm not sure exactly right now how I feel about having an ad hoc committee. I mean, they have specific duties, but I mean, I would hate to spend all the time saying, okay, this is what I want, and then have it sent to an ad hoc committee. That could end up changing it all around and bringing it back to the board. If we're having an ad hoc committee, I would suggest that you have staff on that ad hoc committee, not just board members. I mean, this is basically for the staff. They should have more input and into this, I think, and their strategic planning, because again, I come from a culture that's pretty much the way it works. So anyway, that's my opinion.
Get clarification, are you suggesting we have like 2 6-hour meetings?
2 or 3.
Or 3 4-hour meetings?
Whatever,
or however we
yeah,
see
I
fit?
mean, maybe on a Saturday, have 4 hours. I mean, to me, you're talking about 4 months, or you're talking about 12 hours, basically, from the way what's down here. You could easily have 2 6-hour days or 3 4-hour days on a Saturday over those 3 months period.
So is your
Where-
concern the amount of hours?
No, my concern is not inside hours at all.
Dedication of
It's a-
time.
It's a dedication of time, let people have more chance to really think about, you know, they've been working on something all day and all of a sudden they're gonna come here and switch gears. It's difficult. anyway.
Well, I mean, one thing you mentioned, location, one thing, that I like about having it here is because now we have the ability to record things. And I thought that would make it easier on staff, for Carrie or, Jeff, if they need to go back and see what we've discussed. Also, in terms of transparency, it's gonna be available for anybody to review it. So we will be showing, hey, this is what we did during our strategic plan. If we go to offsite, obviously, we're not gonna have that ability, and it's gonna put more pressure on staff to make sure, they write everything down. So that was, as far as location. As far as time, like doing it before a meeting or on it ends up being on a Saturday. So I mean, to me, it's kind of do people wanna come in on Saturday to do this for 4 hours, and we're gonna have to do like 3 Saturdays, either, 3 Saturdays in a row or something like that. So I thought, and then when you do that, you most likely have to have everybody come in, because, you're gonna be, because it's 4 hours, you're gonna be covering substantial number of topics there. So all the staff members have to be there for possibly 3 weeks. I thought
Can
this.
I interrupt you right there? That's not true. I mean, you can have a 4-6 hour meeting and you will know. I mean, the
But you have to have-
first two, you will have maybe fire and rec. They're the only ones that need to be there. So the whole staff does not need to be.
And then I just, in the past, at least from my experience, was that after like 3 or, after a couple of hours, you get so tired, and because this is, it's involved, you talk, you have to think, you have to come up with solutions, things like that. So, I mean, at least I personally thought it would have been easier to break it up, and then have the staff come in, and.
Could I respond to that one?
Sure.
Okay, for you or for me, maybe that's true, but you've got the staffs work for 8 hours. Now they're coming in here at 5 o'clock and having to spend another 2 hours. So I'm looking at this kind of from the staff's point of view, more than our point of view.
Yeah, so no matter whether they wanna come in on a Saturday or stay, because we're gonna have a meeting anyways. Well, we're gonna have a meeting at 7 o'clock, so basically it's just those 2 hours, we're gonna be providing meal. And is informal, sitting down and trying to make it as nice as possible, so. I don't know, but anyways, if you guys wanna go that route, then we'll have to find a location, and then, as I said, we will lose the ability to.
Well,
But,
we could always have it here. I mean, I think at least it was when I was involved in this kind of stuff.
I mean, we could,
A
I guess.
proven
ask if-
fact, when you get out of the work site, your mind functions better.
I guess we could ask the staff, see what they feel.
I think in an ideal world, I agree, Wayne, like, it would be nice to get out of this room. However, for me, the cost benefit, losing the ability to record. the
That's true,
meeting,
yeah, that's,
Like, is a sacrifice that I don't wanna make, just because I think one of the things that we've talked about is like how little engagement we have from the community, and anything that we can do to create space for people to either join virtually or access the materials later, I think that we should be mindful of. I mean, I guess, Wayne, to your point, like, I don't know, Jeff, if you have a sense of a pulse from the staff, if the proposed structure, would be.
I think the feedback that I've got was, there's a little concern that by breaking it up too much, there's not an opportunity for folks on the staff to work together and be together, because they'd be kind of assigned different times. Not to say that they couldn't attend or wouldn't attend most of the meetings. I didn't ask, we weren't evaluating I didn't ask about Saturday availability. I don't think that most people would like to be assigned to come to work for 3 Saturdays.
Yeah.
But that might, I don't feel like I'm going out on a limb on that, but there's other ways to achieve that. Typically Saturdays are done because it's the availability of the board. Like, you can't devote 8 hours during a workday, but this board may be able to. You might be able to say, no, we can do that on 2 half days on a Tuesday or not a board meeting day. So if the issues you don't want there may be a way to sort of split this, and I'm just thinking out loud here, but maybe there's a way to kind of take both proposals and split and say, okay, what if these were held on off board meetings, they started at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, if you were available, and then there wasn't that that you didn't run out of time, and we weren't asking staff to give up 3 or 4 weekend days or something of that nature.
I kind of misspoke, but I mean, when I was talking, when I said Saturday, I was thinking that it didn't have to be. I think, Eric, you still have every other Friday or something.
Yeah, so I mean, my only difficulty is on Tuesdays before, there will be at least one Tuesday, which I won't be able to attend until later hour. I don't have a concern with the other ones on that level, but.
I mean, it doesn't have to be Saturday, it could be, and in fact is, I would prefer, and I think the staff would prefer, to have it on a Friday, just to throw out a time, from 1 to 5 or something. They're getting paid for that time, they don't have to come in extra, they can still go home when they want. I think it would be,
I don't really come on Saturdays either.
well, I don't.
But I do, I kind of appreciate just a little bit of like devil's advocate. I like a little bit more of breaking it up into chunks. Personally, because I like to do I like to come super prepared, and I feel like by breaking things up, it allows me the focus and preparation to research whatever I want to research beforehand. Whereas if you have a larger dedication of time, the idea is that you may potentially be covering more topics. And especially because I'm new to the board, I want to feel like I have the most information as readily available and at the forefront of my mind as I can. That not to say that I'm super excited about a 4-hour meeting every Tuesday. But I think that kind of goes to the ad hoc thing too. That I think the danger that I've seen in a lot of large strategic planning sessions is that folks maybe are coming and hoping to accomplish absolutely everything in those meetings. And I don't think that that is always possible. And I think that the strategic brainstorming sessions could be more productive if there was more. I know we've gone through a little bit, reviewing the past strategic plans, but if there's more preparation that we all do ahead of time so that we are really coming with specifics, and I think, I don't know, I would think that as a staff member, knowing exactly the discussion points for each meeting would give me more framework so that I would be prepared instead of like potentially blowing 4 hours on a meeting that could veer into more of, like soft stuff instead of staying super particular. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, I've been more afraid that would happen in a 2-hour meeting, and then you didn't.
Well, I would hope that like in a 2-hour meeting, that we have a smaller period of time that everybody comes in ready to go. That we're not potentially spending a ton of time like whiteboarding, like, okay, you know what I mean? That everyone comes in already with suggestions or with an idea so that we potentially spend less time writing things on like black, you know what I mean? Like on a notebook and like doing a lot of fishing that way, but we all come in with more concrete items.
I mean, I'm not opposed to either. I think, at least from my perspective, the 5 to 7 o'clock for us to initially kick this off, we will have a better feel of how productive we are within those periods of time. And if we need to revise the scheduling, so we have more dedicated time, is that something that we can come back towards?
Yeah,
We start with this general schedule here of 2 hours beforehand. We see how productive we are with it. Determine whether or not we need to have more dedicated time with staff. rather than just the 2 hours.
Yeah, I mean, you could amend as you go. These would be special meetings. They could be called at 24 hours notice. So you'd have the ability to alter the schedule. But I guess I wouldn't want to start something that you saw is just not gonna work, right? That's, I want to make sure that whatever we
I mean, I think it would work at the very least for some of the, whether or not we do an ad hoc for like the vision and the, stuff like that, I don't think we would need more than a 2-hour meeting for those.
Well, the first one, yeah, it's supposed to be the vision, mission, and I personally, I thought I was gonna get 15 minutes to talk about
Yeah.
not the vision, what were they?
core values and.
Core values and
Yeah.
mission, 15 minutes each, because we've already talked about those. So the majority of time was gonna be spent on parks, and then the next one was gonna be fire, and then we even splitting water and wastewater, so those are gonna be two. I mean, from what I recall, at the last strategic plans that we had, it was all day. We went at 8 o'clock and finished about 4 o'clock, but the first 4 to 6 hours, we did not talk about strategies. So we spent like 2 hours, I think, and it was hurry. So I thought this was gonna give us plenty of time to discuss, in general, each department, so.
With
And
all
if we
due
need to-
respect, 15 minutes with this group?
Well, I mean,
Uh-huh.
well, that's where then, no, we talk about, it, and that's where we could utilize that HOG committee and say, okay, this is what we wanna see, and then they could go. And, with the help of staff, I mean, Jeff's gonna be available and, whoever then, they need to, meet with, and then come up with the wording. So we tell them the idea, and that's what I was hoping to come up with the big picture stuff. And then instead of spending a lot of time on the details, the ad hoc committee could do that, come back, report to us. I mean, obviously, we're still gonna have time, be able to discuss it and, and change it if we need to, but they could come up with at least the format of how we should present it.
I have a question, and I'm new to the board, so forgive some of these questions, but in previous iterations of strategic planning, and not necessarily the most recent one, but in the history of the district, is it the board who comes up or should be coming up with each particular goal, or is it the staff? Because I feel like yes, the board is knowledgeable and we're here to advise, but who better to be able to set some of the specific, departmental goals than the staff? And so if that's the case, what is the format of the discussion gonna be, like where we have the staff member sort of share with us?
Yes.
And then the board gives feedback and we, you know what I mean?
Like I just asked them, they'll come and they'll tell us what they wanna see in the
Yeah.
next 3 years. And then based on what they recommend, their thoughts are, then we could discuss where we see the importance of, our, strategies are gonna be, where we need to prioritize. But they are gonna lead us to that direction. I kind of feel like that's the problem had been previously, where I don't think the staff put much of an input. I mean, I don't even remember the last.
I agree 100%. I
Yeah.
mean, and from where I came from, it was pretty much the staff would
Yeah.
put together the whole thing and then present it to the board. And that's pretty much the way it
Yeah,
went.
yeah.
It's always been here, the board does most of the nonsense and some of the stuff they don't even understand what you're talking about.
Exactly. So now,
So I would say in consideration, we have that special meeting, the 2 hours, we have basically staff present to us within that special meeting.
Yep.
We review and set priorities from it.
Yeah, I agree.
And then that 2 hours is welcome enough time for us to actually discuss the priorities of it.
Uh-huh.
And then we're not having to deal with the minutia, we're not having to deal with it.
No.
So then that timeline that's been outlined would work for us, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty big shift from what we've dealt with before. So in the past, up through 2020, the district had an outside facilitator lead this effort. My observation is the outside facilitator has a system that they
Uh-huh.
use, and they try to make our organization fit that system. And over the years, sometimes that worked better than others, and it could be derailed. And my observation is that primarily the board spoke and the staff was here as a resource to answer questions, to bring up facts. Remember, there's a big difference between the staff has the history and the facts and the knowledge and the technical expertise of what's needed, but not necessarily the perspective of the community. That's what the board brings, right? What are you hearing from residents as important? Hopefully they're sharing, hopefully you're hearing from your neighbors and your friends and about what's important. That may not be coming to us through our day-to-day interactions. So I think it's a little bit of both, but I would say that in the past, some of the observations have been, boy, that was a long day to just sit there and watch the board talk. Because there wasn't much of a role for staff. There was a facilitator role and the board role, and not always a lot of time for staff to work with the board on kind of identifying those goals, or was that a reasonable set of solutions. So we could come more prepared than we have in the past, but we're different. If we're not gonna use a facilitator, we have a lot more control about how this is gonna, we collectively have a lot more control instead of the facilitator trying to make this day work with their system.
If we actually had a facilitator that would facilitate, I think the last two that we had in the past were more trying to tell us how to get along and talk about our personality, and I flunked that one, but anyway. I think it was a big flop, and other reasons too, but the other thing I just wanna mention, didn't you, Eric, say you're gonna have a hard time making? One,
of them.
yeah, so then we'll have to change that, but I don't disagree with anything that I've heard. It was just kind of my opinion. I would definitely, the bottom line is I'd like to see most of all of this stuff put into effect. I'd like to hear more from the staff on what they're planning to do. We can't tell them what they need to plan. They're gonna tell us what they're planning to do.
Yeah, because
And then we'll come up with a timeline or a policy or based on what they're telling us.
I mean, all throughout this, not just in the wastewater or water, but it's mentioned like there was a fire plan that was developed. So all of these other plans that this or the previous strategic plan was referencing, like the district is gonna support this other endeavor, so. Yeah, I just want the staff to lead, like who better? I don't know, I mean.
I do have a question. Are we going to use put out an RFP to do a new master plan? I mean, all the other ones, that's kind of the way it worked.
For what, water and wastewater?
The utilities,
Yes,
wastewater.
yes.
Yeah, it's coming in February.
Okay, you and I get to do that.
Yeah, come to the committee first.
Right,
And then
okay.
we'll go from there as soon as we're happy with.
Yes.
So,
Release it in
yeah, the master
February-ish.
plan usually comes up with some experts or whatever, although fire one was, as far as I was concerned, was terrible. Anyway,
Can I ask a question as the staff? Would you be hoping that staff would kind of keep it on track as well, like facilitate a little bit since we won't have an outside facilitator? Or would there be like yourself as the president kind of moving it along?
Well, yeah,
Jeff.
I'm gonna.
Okay.
I'm open to that.
I think we would need to come up with some sort of a
Roles.
plan for each meeting so that we can make sufficient progress. I mean, part of my concern was, it's like, okay, if the first one's gonna be in 2 weeks, I need some feedback so we can be somewhere. I'm not here for a week of those next 2 weeks. Also, but
Justin will take it.
so I wanna try to get ready. I think what I'm hearing from you is if we're gonna try what's been outlined or something along those lines, that you want us to kind of come with like one of these sheets like drafted
Yes.
Yes,
instead of drafting along the
Yes,
way.
yes.
And this is 180 degrees from what we've done before.
Yes.
I mean, I hope that that's not an unfair ask of staff, but
I
Yeah.
think they'd prefer it, really,
I mean, I don't,
especially with.
you're
you
the
know,
only staff here right now, so if you wanna tell us.
From my perspective, I'm not worried about the minutia. I think from what I hear from the community, reviewing what it is that the staffing brings, we can have a discussion about prioritization of some of the staffing goals. So that we understand, like, from those individuals who we're representing, that's how we identify, and not the individual goals themselves, because that's what staff is outlining that we should be achieving. But we can take a look at how we prioritize them. So if that draft gets presented to us, then we can go and review amongst each other on how we feel that should be, implemented.
Setting priority dates and.
I mean, I think we did a great job with all of the hassles that we've had over the last 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. If we could all get on the same page and work together, I think it would be a lot greater thing.
I think
Yeah.
this discussion that we had just right now has been a lot more productive and fruitful than we had the whole strategic plan. It's just, I'm serious. I mean, we never felt like got anywhere. So, I mean, and I appreciate that. So, but then I guess it goes with the timing as far as what you.
Yeah.
And so we're just mainly, it's gonna be for parks for next meeting. So, and I had asked, Melissa, so be prepared. So
Yeah, I can confirm that,
Yeah.
that Mel and Justin are available
Oh, yeah, so
on
Justin.
February 4th to talk about parks, and we actually are gonna, we have internally some other, just to help get, I didn't know what to expect, but if you want us to come up with some draft materials, we can do that. I'll be playing catch up, because we have nothing put together now, and.
Do you wanna push it out?
No,
One-
but
one- Well, you could just see what happens if,
Yeah, we'll
if
see.
it doesn't work out, then we'll push it out one meeting.
That's
Because
But
we
I
are
think we can for sure do the mission,
Yeah.
those things with,
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
items, but I think we can, I think we can have.
Yeah.
Give this a kind of it'll be like a little trial.
A test run?
Yeah.
For the first one, and see, how concrete of information are you looking for? This is it's a deviation from the past. I think the past was more focused on what the board thought was important, and staff was a resource to that effort. And again, I think as Wayne kind of pointed out, there was just and this wasn't just one consultant, the prior ones too, just trying to accomplish too much in one day, and we always ran out of energy and time.
Yeah.
Eric, what's it's not next week, or the 4th, that you're unavailable Tuesday?
We're gonna stick with the 5 to 7 versus.
5 to 7.
3, or otherwise it would be 3 sessions in the afternoon, so I mean, but I mean, as I
Yeah, I
said,
think
the-
we're agreeing to
Okay.
use the 5 to 7 on
Okay,
February
and
4th.
then we could change it.
The only questionable one I have is March 18th.
That's a maybe,
So
or that's a no.
No, that's a maybe.
That's a
maybe, and you won't be able to attend it at all, or you just be late?
I don't know.
Okay.
You're traveling.
Okay, alright. And that would be something if we.
Well, again, we
could
could,
Zoom, right? If we. Because
No,
it's
I
not
won't
a,
be sick, I'll be traveling.
yeah, there's
No,
some
but-
limitations about,
but it's not a, it's not a.
it
It's
needs
a-
to be a
It's
board
a
meeting.
special, it's not, it's.
The rules are the same.
Workshop.
Same rules. So, but as long as we would know, beforehand, we could just decide and just
Pick a
not to hold
different-
one that
yeah,
night.
That's
Pick a different day.
Yeah. That would be fine with me. I mean, and also, if you're looking back, previous strategic plans have taken 6 to 9 months for us to prepare, so, I mean, this is a pretty, I mean, 3 months is gonna be really, pretty.
If it went all the way up in
Went
May 6th.
May 6th. Okay.
Let's hope,
And then,
I hope so too.
Yeah, and I think so you could probably do some self-evaluation along the way,
Yeah.
maybe after the first one, is this gonna work? Or are we too time limited and can we pivot to something else? Again, the concept of the Saturdays was, historically, there were a number of board members who maybe couldn't devote time during the workday. And so we held them on Saturdays
Yeah.
and for the public, but that may not be a,
Yeah.
you may have, this
Yeah,
board
we
may
could
have.
do a
more
Friday or
With
something.
this board, we only got one person that works. I mean, well, that's true. I mean, when I first came on the board, I think everybody on the board.
Fridays work fine for me, any Friday.
Well, I mean, we are still could go if the first one session we see is not working, we could change it to Fridays. I'm open to that.
We could have the first session and then after our 7 o'clock meeting,
We just-
discuss it then, how it went.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm open to that. That's fine.
That sounds good.
And then what about the ad hoc committee? You guys are okay with that?
I think we'll know more after
Yeah,
we have a session or two.
Okay.
I mean, my problem with the ad hoc committee is that I think I know two people who always ought to be on it. And,
It's not me, I'm not.
So,
gonna-
you know, so I don't think that works very well.
I have a quick question. So it would become a board, a Brown issue if there's three or more of us on an ad hoc committee. So an ad hoc committee would potentially be like two and then a staff member or, okay. got it.
Yeah.
2 or 3 staff members.
Yeah, the staff.
Yeah, and the nice thing about ad hoc committee is they could be pretty fluid. That committee wouldn't have to follow the Brown Act. You could, let's say 2 of you are on a committee and go, we have a lot of energy on this right now. Can we meet tomorrow at 1 o'clock and keep going without having to post notices and things like that? Just keep, I mean, the idea behind this ad hoc committee was it would only be kind of keeping up with this process. Like they would do I was
The
envisioning,
follow up.
yeah, the wordsmithing and the things that I don't want to see us get drug into.
And I think having the option for an ad hoc committee is something that we should always maintain.
Yeah.
But I think our first meeting, we've identified what our pros and cons are.
Do we?
But you don't need our approval anyway. You can appoint an ad hoc committee at your whim, so I mean, it's.
Okay, yeah, so we don't have to,
Very nice.
we don't have to like right now.
You do not have to decide now. And actually, the
Can't-
president has the ability to appoint one whether you want there to be one or not, so.
They can do it. They can-
I guess you don't have to show up to it if you're.
And then, yes, and I thought it would be a good idea to, at the end, to highlight what we did. And so that's what, again, for transparency and for future reference, to just, remember, okay, this worked out, this didn't work out, so that would be part of something that I. Okay, so so we'll just leave things as is then. Okay. All right.
So, before we move on.
Okay.
Please put on your calendar, 5 PM, February 4th,
Okay,
special meeting.
all right, 5 p.m. Got it.
Can I ask the question?
Oh, yes, please.
And briefly, why do you need a strategic plan?
You want to answer that?
I don't know, so I think the answer is you don't need one. There's not a requirement to have one, but most effective agencies, including agencies like this, do have one to help unify the big picture planning and to express to the public what the district believes is its important long-term goals.
And said prior.
Not the public, knows much about it, so.
Yeah, I don't think they do either.
When I joined when I was interested in joining the board, it was a resource that I turned to educate
okay.
myself. And so, I think it's a good tool to have all of your information codified, for external, interests as well.
Yeah, and for the staff to know which direction, we're going towards, so specific plans and things like that, projects, so they know, okay, they need to focus on this versus the other projects, so just set it's a guideline basically to see where we wanna speak. Okay, all right, so that was discussion, so we do not need to vote on that, we just give direction, and I think you have enough, if it doesn't work out next meeting for Mellow.
We'll be able to do this at 5.
Oh, and then, again, as you can see, it's just, it's not gonna be the quantity of stuff, we don't want 2 or 3 pages for each department, is quality, and to be able to cover everything, and, so hopefully that's gonna be helpful as well. Okay. Next item, regular board meeting start time discussion. One.
Oh. Okay, so,
People are smiling.
so, the president, board president Fernandes wanted to have a discussion on this to determine whether there was interest in adjusting your regular meeting start times. So we just did a little research on this. It looks like the best we can tell, the district board meetings have always been at 7 PM on Tuesdays since at least 1981 and likely since the beginning of the formation of the district in 1976. So a long time, 40, almost 50 years and maybe 50 years, or 49. The reason, so government entities like us, often meet in the evenings, and that has been historically, it's been that way to accommodate board members' work schedules and the public, right? There can be criticism if you meet during, while the public's working, they'll criticize that I couldn't attend your meeting because I'm at work. That was an inappropriate time for you to conduct business. Larger agencies have often met just the opposite. They're for a large city or counties. Typically, the elected officials don't maintain a regular day job. That it's sufficient enough of either their income or their time devotion that they devote a lot of time to those efforts, and they're held during the day. So almost all counties meet during the day, and large cities and council meetings are held during the day, and they have a much longer agendas. It wouldn't be practical for them to be able to start and conclude a meeting in the evening. In this county, there actually are some very small agencies that do meet during the day. Cambria CSD is one of them. They hold their meetings, I believe, at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Napomo CSD, they hold their meetings at 10 o'clock in the morning. And because of that, they end up with essentially 100% retiree board members. Cambria is a very much retirement community in particular. And so they have a robust public participation during those daytime meetings. So I think, our meetings were at 7 o'clock because it was convenient for board members and convenient for the public, or was believed to be convenient for the public. I think it's a little less important that you align your meetings after a member of the public could have had dinner. I think 7 o'clock kind of works really well for that. People can get off work, come home, have dinner, get the kids settled, whatever, and make it to a meeting. But because our meetings are now broadcast on the internet, through Zoom, and there's other ways for members of the public to participate, they can do so while they're having dinner or from their car or whatever. So I think that's a little bit less important. So moving the meeting times up a little bit probably has minimal impact on public participation. And in fact, maybe our society's changed. I'm kind of one who's usually, when I go home, I don't really leave again in the evening. It's not something that I'm running out to go to meetings at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. So your own schedules would be important, and then beyond your own, I think we should think about how future board members what would their availability be, and would you pick a time that essentially narrowed the pool of future board applicants? And I think that's something that you should keep in mind, because as you know, we at least in the recent past have had to kind of pull some teeth to get folks to serve on the board, and I wouldn't want to make that more difficult. I think what's before you is consideration to change the normal meeting, the regular meeting times to 6 PM or perhaps 6:30 PM if those still worked. And that might be more convenient for others. Staff, I think generally would prefer to, earlier is great, as long as it means the meeting doesn't go longer, or doesn't still go to 2 o'clock.
Thank you. All right, so this item is up for discussions. What do you guys think?
Okay, I'll start this one too.
All right.
I'd love to start the meetings at 5 or 6, but following up, I guess, what Jeff was saying, I think future board members might have a problem. I mean, we actually might get 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 4 or 5 board members that actually work for a living, that aren't retired, that don't have the type of job where they can just show up. And I hate to say it, just because it's something that's been done in the past, we should continue to do it, but I think Jeff kind of really outlined my feelings on that also, that it's a set time, you can tell people 7 o'clock, first and third Tuesdays of the month. Again, I would prefer to be down here at 6, but, you know, I think we probably should leave it, really.
Are you introducing this topic because your suggestion is to move it up to 6 or 6:30?
Yes, I thought it would be a good idea. One is because now, because of Zoom, people are able to attend and, you know, we live in a small county, so if future board members, if they, you know, they wanna attend the meeting, they should be able to still come at 6 o'clock. It's, you know, you're not, you know, travel time here, maximum, you know, half an hour, at least at this point. And also for purposes of staff, you know, I know staff, it's, you know, they work all day and it kind of gets late for them, so some of them don't even go home, they stay, wait for us to meet at 7 o'clock. You know, I think talking to staff, they thought it would be nice, and I thought it would be a good incentive, you know, we're always looking to make things better, improve the lives of our employees, so I thought this would be a good situation. I mean, I've come to meetings ever for at least this meeting since what, 2012, 2013, I've come to these meetings all the time, so, but you know, it's, you know, it's hard, you go home and then you gotta get up and go to a meeting, so for public, it's a little bit harder incentive. So that's why I brought it up. I think it's a good thing to do. One other thing I thought was, you know, previously when you had attorneys come to your meetings or other consultants, they always had to come in. So that would have
We
been.
got Zoom for.
That's what we got Zoom for now, so they don't have it, so things have changed since 1980, so, you know, I just thought, and I've looked at Atascadero and Paso Robles. They start at 6 o'clock as well, so it's kind of, I thought times have changed, things are changing, so, and, you know, again, I think it would be a good change to see for staff, and when the meetings get longer, it's just everyone gets tired, you know, it's harder concentration wise. And if we start, say, at 6 o'clock, you know, that, you know, we could finish up by 8 o'clock, which I think, you know, it'd be good, you know, it'd be nice, you know. So the staff could be home earlier rather than see them stay till 9.
Hear about the staff we have on these meetings, but you don't, it's okay to have them come here at 5 o'clock and stay till 7.
That's only it's only for 3 meetings, I am sure they'll be okay. It's just a temporary for 3 meetings. And again, they're already here, they're staying here, they're not going home, they're waiting for us to meet at 7 o'clock, so,
My only hesitation, and this is just because I am working full time, my workday doesn't end until 5:30.
Right,
And I work in San Luis Obispo, and to get up here by 6 o'clock
that's tight.
may have difficulties with that. 6:30 is plenty to do. The other hesitation is there is the infrequent times where I have to support the city of San Luis Obispo's, you know, their government, which they have their meetings the exact same days at 5:30. So there's some overlap. 7 o'clock works fantastic for that because I can support that and go forward, but I would be willing to entertain 6:30.
I think keeping 7 is fine. I think we should maybe make a goal of working on brevity in the meetings rather than adjusting the time.
You should go to the school board. The school board, they have
Long enough.
closed session starts at 3. They have their meetings, and when I was on the bond oversight over there, they actually have meetings that go until 12, and then
We're working on brevity, okay, right now. We're working on brevity.
And then they have some clause that if it goes past 12, they gotta have a vote.
So there's also one good point of having it at 7 is that we do have a closed session beforehand. We have adequate time to discuss those closed session items. So that is a positive because if we do start it early, we may have to have the closed session afterwards.
which, you know, by then the staff could go home, yeah, so that's, you know, the kinds of things.
Staff are compensated for this time, are they not?
Yeah.
If they have to attend,
I'm sorry, some staff receive
flex time or compensation?
I don't think that should be a real consideration. I mean, we signed up for this. This is, you know, I've been doing this for more than half of my life, coming to these night meetings, but, you know, it's not anyone's idea of a great time. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. I think, you know, if it started earlier, we would get home earlier, but I don't think that this is, I think you should think about, if you're gonna make a change, it should be based on the community needs and the future board needs, and I only caution you about making a change that's only convenient for this board.
Yeah.
And that has to be changed again, because I think it does dictate who would be interested and who would be able to sign up, and that you ought not change very often.
I mean, yeah, I mean, Eric, you're the perfect example, like, how many people who are working full-time work outside of Templeton, work somewhere else in the county?
Mhm.
And so we want to continue to increase participation. I want to make sure that there's a wide enough time buffer where no matter where you work in the county, if you reside in Templeton, you can be either a board member or participate with the
All right, so let's see. So you want to stay with 7 o'clock?
You talking me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, you want to stick with 7?
We'll stick with 7.
7, okay, 3, all right. We'll leave it at 7.
Sherry loves it.
Okay, general manager's report.
Let's see, I don't have a whole heck of a lot to add, to what I sent you, I believe Friday. Before this meeting, I will note that, the last water unit offers that we made have lapsed. None of the most recent parties that were notified accepted any units. So we're preparing another notice to go out for the remaining 46 units, and I believe they'll go out tomorrow.
Wow.
So, 30 days at a time.
Wow. You're almost finishing up the wait list, aren't you?
Well,
Really, you're down to 900 something?
Yeah, I just updated it.
yeah, I think we've gone through about half the number of parcels, approximately so far.
Like,
Wow.
We're at 2.5 pages and we.
Maybe
got
5 or 6.
Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing.
Still just plugging away.
Yeah.
I don't have any other items that I noted to call. Oh, I can. I am scheduled to be gone all of next week. But I'll have availability. I mean, I'll have email and cell phone availability.
Okay, any questions for general manager? Public, any questions, general manager? Okay. Committee reports, we have a tag report, anything on that?
I noticed on that report that it said that there's an election. At the last meeting, I think they threw out the election because there's 3 candidates and 3 positions. They're just gonna go with that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you the alternate or are you?
Yeah, I'm alternate delegate number 2.
Okay. Congratulations, good job. Okay, activities update, any questions on engineering? Thank you again for the report, very thorough. Public, any questions on engineering? Finance, any questions on finance? Fire and emergency services, any questions on that? Public? Parks and Rec and solid waste, any questions on that? No, okay. Utilities, any questions on that? Public? Thank you, Justin, appreciate it. Okay, director's report and or comments. Any meetings that you have been to that anything to report on? Okay. Oh, on Thursday, I was asked to go to Rec Center. TRF is going to present a check to Parks and Rec from the beer run. So that would be nice.
Did we ever get anything from the fundraiser, the other one?
Living the Dream? I have not.
I have not received a final announcement of what will be donated, but our expectation is that yes, they will make a separate donation from the Live in the Dream.
And then obviously there's the CSDA meeting coming up on Thursday. And today I just signed the application to do the 4-year term for LAFCO. So there will be a election, so we'll see. And then also, I think I'm going to put the IWMA nomination on the next agenda as well. I would like us to consider participating, being on
What is it?
IWMA for waste.
Integrated
Oh.
Waste Management Authority.
Okay, that will be, I think, something important for us to be on, especially now that the executive director is going to retire. So I think if we could, Templeton, be there as a representative, because previously things have been different, so it would be nice to continue that, or be part of that. Okay, anything else? I think no comments, sir. Okay, all right, meeting adjourned.